What's up gamers, DreamcastGuy here, reviewing today Mortal Kombat 11. Throughout history, there have been very few series that I would consider legendary, things that really managed to stand the test of time. Well, of course we have titles like Mario, Zelda, Final Fantasy, and Street Fighter, but among these, there are very few that I would consider almost perfect. One that I think definitely does fit this, though, is Mortal Kombat. This entire franchise, despite having some highs and lows, manages to continually improve itself and somehow become even more inventive as the decades go on. Now let me just say right up front, Mortal Kombat 11 is a very good game, but it does have one aspect that is completely broken, but I want to talk about that towards the end of the video because quite frankly, it's just so negative I don't want to open with it. So let's just start by digging into the story this time around because it is downright hilarious. So obviously one of the things that makes Mortal Kombat so funny in the first place is the fact that this is a game that is just cartoonishly brutal, with people ripping each other's faces off, blowing up secret temples, and constantly trying to be the goriest freaking game it can be. But beyond this, it actually has a pretty interesting story and a bunch of lore at the center of it. There is real motivation for why these people continuously just fight and fight and fight. And this time around, I have to say that this is definitely my favorite of all the Mortal Kombat stories because they decided to throw in some freaking time travel. Yes, that's right. They have now had somebody who could basically break the timeline and combine a young Johnny Cage and old Johnny Cage. We can see dead characters finally returning to seek their own revenge, and just basically have everybody really uniting for the first time ever, and I think that this was such a cool choice. It sort of rewards the diehard fans, and I think that it probably provides a really interesting coming on point for newer people who are just starting the franchise. Perhaps if you only played this on Sega Genesis growing up, you're not going to know a ton of these new fighters. Well, this gives you an opportunity to enjoy the old school Liu Kang you may remember. Now let me just say, I think that all this is good, but what's really important is of course the combat itself. I mean, this is Mortal Kombat, so let's talk about the fighting. I think this time around they've done a lot of stuff to try and tweak it to become easier and harder simultaneously. So the big thing of course is special attacks, trying to constantly push your opponent into a corner and execute every single move you can to reduce their health to zero before yours. But there's a lot more, well, there's a lot more technical aspects to this. So if you've never played Mortal Kombat, but you've played a lot of other fighters, I like to just say that this is a much more slow and technical fighter. It's one where you actually have a chance to sit and think in the middle of each match and try and decide how best to eliminate your opponent. This slower style of combos and combat is actually something where it really seems to flourish. It gives you more of an opportunity to learn your character and learn your mistakes as you're fighting. Something you need to keep in mind as well, though, is the fact that even if you happen to think you're not doing great with a particular character, there are different stances, different ways you can play each character, and it sort of reminds me of like sword fighting in real life. Yes, of course, the objective is to swing the sword efficiently, but there's so many different stances and styles. There's so many different methodologies to the blade that there's not exactly just one correct way to fight, and that's exactly how Mortal Kombat 11 feels, and honestly why I love it. It's a game that I found myself really enjoying characters that typically I wouldn't have. I mean, one of the main ones I found myself just beating the heck out of people with was Shao Kahn, somebody who in previous games I downright hated just because he was such a freaking clunky character, and now he's actually awesome. It's so cool being able to slam people all over the arena with my massive 800-pound hammer. But something that actually keeps this game feeling very fair, even if you're playing against an enemy that is much higher skill level than you, is of course the comeback systems. So basically you have different offensive and defensive capabilities, which are basically shown with these little energy bars to the side. So you need to try and keep in mind that there are special blocks, special counters, and special moves you can try and utilize to really manage to do the most damage possible. But if you happen to screw up and get weakened relatively fast, you can of course pull off your special death blows. These are basically like the fatal blow is basically a way of evening the odds. It can only be executed at very low health, but it manages to basically do a giant super attack with just 2 button presses and really sort of basically gives you a fighting chance, no pun intended. It sounds like such a minor mechanic, but really, especially in online matches, you realize that this is a really neat little added element, and I think that it's something it definitely makes it where I never had a complete loss. I always had a chance to almost win even when I lose, and I like the game that manages to, it feels fair, it feels balanced, even when I am just being utterly decimated. And I think that part of this is because the game very smartly tries to train you at how to do it. Now, of course, there are actually some very smart tutorials in this game if you choose to do them, but if you're somebody like me who really just likes to learn by doing, there are a series of towers. So basically, this is very much a classic arcade style. There's a series of opponents in your path that you need to try and battle your way through in order to reach the top, with each consecutive match becoming a little bit more difficult. To me personally, this is definitely the most fun part of the game because it just kind of cuts everything out. It doesn't worry about the story, it doesn't worry about the fanciness, it's just about you and an opponent trying to beat each other to death before the timer runs out. Now, there is actually something extra to this that's kind of interesting, which is sort of a remixed version of this called the Towers of Time. Now, this is sort of the same element in that you're still going up a series of fights, but the big twist is that every single one of the rounds actually has, well, these weird added twists to it. Like this one right here is one where there's this Blood Queen that I'm trying to fight, Scarlet of course, and as I'm battling her, there are these missiles that keep appearing out of thin air and actually fly straight towards me. And if I'm not able to dodge them or block them in time, being hit by them will actually suck out some of my health and give it to Scarlet. It is something that is so unbelievably difficult, but it definitely encourages you to get better faster. It creates an extra situational awareness, and it really sort of highlights what I love the absolute most about Mortal Kombat 11, which is that it's strength through training. It's constantly pushing you and encouraging you to see that next choice, to think critically and learn just by doing it. It doesn't just show a button prompt, it doesn't just suggest something, it really basically says, okay, here's what you can do, but you better do it now or else you'll die. Okay, so now that we've talked about the good, let me tell you about the thing in this game that downright sucks, that in my opinion is freaking broken, which is the new style of unlocks. So as you play through each of these different towers, online modes, and beat the story, you get different currencies, each one having a different purpose. There's basically gold, there's things that are like time crystals, and each of these are basically used to go in here and start to unlock things. Now, at the beginning, this probably looks like some sort of cool third-person adventure where I'm actually going around and having a chance to explore this cool, giant, infinite crypt. Well, here's the downside. This is needed to unlock everything. Yes, you heard me correctly. Everything is unlocked this way. Extra fatalities, all sorts of outfits, customization stuff, literally hundreds of different things are locked within this crypt. And some of them actually basically encourage real life money being spent. And even if you try and be cheap like I did and not spend a single penny, you're still going to be spending hundreds of hours instead because this is so tedious and so grindy. The deeper you go in this crypt, you get extra options for basically unlocking new secrets. You can get a hammer so you can ring a gong and open up that next big gate. And this basically lets you go deeper in there and unlock even more stuff, but you're just going to be burning through your currency. It's basically the game trying to almost feel like a cell phone game, trying to basically be like, hey, you can either pay money now and get this cool unlockable, or just do another 500 matches. It's something that's just so needless. Why in a Mortal Kombat game am I not able to just do every fatality by memorizing it? Why am I having to actually unlock special moves? Why am I having to unlock all this stuff that in my opinion should just be instantly done? It's so ridiculous that this game is trying to charge you for stuff that it should just be easily accessible. Make it where I unlock characters by beating the game, or make it where I get the coolest outfits simply by conquering every single tower. Why is there even a crypt except for maybe silly little cosmetics? It's frustrating because it feels like it's punishing me even when I'm playing my best. As much as I respect the developers over at NetherRealm Studios, this definitely seems like somebody up at the top figured, okay, we could probably just extra monetize the fan base and trick people into constantly going into this crypt and spending a couple pennies at a time. This is actually why I delayed my review until today, is because when a lot of the other reviewers were actually working on their videos, this was not available. We actually couldn't see into the price tags until day one. This is such a deceptive measure in my opinion. They're really clearly trying to hide the fact that this is a real money sinkhole, and to me that is frustrating and deceptive and really kind of drags down an overall very solid experience. Okay, so we've heard some good and some bad, but let's go over to the ratings board and put a big number on it. I am giving Mortal Kombat 11 an 8 out of 10. Before this video is over, I just want to say that if they manage to later on patch this out and remove a lot of the exploitive measures of this microtransaction system, I would actually consider this game a solid 9 or even 9.5 out of 10. That is seriously how much I enjoyed this. It's just that one aspect that seriously damages the overall fun. Thanks so much for watching, gamers. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. And for those who are actually going to ask what my favorite character is, I actually think it's Liu Kang. I never really was that good with him, but Liu Kang now seems to be just so kick-heavy, and I love just beating the heck out of everybody with these iron fists. It's pretty freaking legit. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.